despite the negotiations between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and the former's assurance that the latter is ready for reasonable talks. Guest Secretary of the United States of America Marco Rubio is confident that sanctions against Russia will indeed be imposed and in the near future. Moreover, Marco Rubio is quite resolute regarding the sanctions, and he speaks of them as something inevitable. And here it is important to note that Marco Rubio himself cautiously pointed out for the first time that the United States Congress can actually impose the toughest sanctions against Russia, and Trump will not be able to do anything about it. Supposedly, there is a voting mechanism in Congress where Trump's hands will simply be tied. He may dislike it, but he'll be powerless to change it. Despite his tantrums in the White House, he still won't be able to do anything. The only question is whether the Republicans in both the House of Representatives and the Senate of the United States Congress are ready to take such a step. My name is Alexei Pecci. Today is May 19th. Before we start discussing this topic, which is quite interesting, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and be sure to leave your comment under this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we promptly publish news as soon as it becomes available. So, do you remember the bill by Republican Senator Lindsey Graham about sanctions against Russia, which has been sitting in the Senate for quite a while now? Let me remind you, since April 1st, there has been a bill in the Senate proposing to introduce new tough sanctions against Russia, as well as tariffs against countries that purchase Russian resources. And according to Graham, such measures could be introduced if Putin refuses to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. According to the document, the sanctions will include raising tariffs by 500% on imports from countries that purchase Russian oil, petroleum products, natural gas, or uranium imposed by Washington. In addition, American citizens are planned to be prohibited from purchasing Russian government bonds. And further, I will quote Lindsey Graham, "I want the war to end through negotiations, honestly and fairly." I believe that Trump is the best person to achieve this goal. But these sanctions reflect the Senate's opinion that we consider Russia to be the main villain. Vladimir Putin will make a huge mistake if he tries to manipulate Trump. That's why this bill is a tool in President Trump's arsenal. But really, let's move on. Graham noted that actions from Washington should be expected when President Trump decides that we've reached a dead end. Only Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance have acknowledged this so far. Then Graham clarified that there is enough support in the United States House of Representatives to pass this bill. Therefore, he believes that in the end, Putin will be forced to choose between negotiations to end the war with Trump and the destruction of the Russian economy. Interestingly, Ushakov is Putin's aide. Today, after the talk between Trump and Putin, he stated that, of course, we are trying to bet on diplomacy. But we clearly remember that a sanctions bill is already prepared in the Senate and how this is an unfriendly step from the Americans. But just yesterday, Marco Rubio stated that Lindsey Graham could actually gather a veto-proof majority in the Senate. That is, such a majority that Trump would not have the right to veto. And then the Senate will act independently of Donald Trump. And now listen to the dialogue between Marco Rubio and a journalist. The journalist asks, "Was Lindsey Graham with you at the meeting with the head of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry in Turkey? He has an unassailable majority on the issue of sanctions against Russia. How quickly do you want to use this option? Or will you ask Lindsey Graham to wait?" Marco Rubio answers, "Look, the Senate in the end will act. Earlier, we asked to be given some time to see if we could make progress in the negotiations, but we were also very clear with the Russian side. For weeks, 6 or 7 weeks, we have been conveying to them, that is to the Russians, that such an attempt is being made. We expect that when we sit down to do this, we will have closer to 80 out of 100 co-authors in the Senate, and I anticipate comparable support in the House of Representatives. And this is an action that we will not be able to stop. We do not control this." In the end, Congress and the Republicans in particular gave President Trump time and space to work something out in the negotiations. But we have been constantly repeating to the Russians for almost 2 months now that this will happen if there is no progress. And now it is happening, says Marco Rubio. And this is one of the things that was confirmed to me when I was with Lindsey Graham in Turkey. Right now they have 77 votes. He thinks he can get closer to 80 or even more. And that's just a fact. That's what we've been telling the Russians for weeks, that this is coming. Well, it's also fair to note here that Rubio is Rubio, Graham is Graham, and Trump is Trump. And most likely everything will depend on Trump's signal, not on what kind of majority Lindsey Graham gathers in the Senate, even if it's 80%. But still, it's worth noting that the Senate could bypass Donald Trump in this way. What is it? If we speak in official terms, it's a majority that is not subject to the right of veto. It's a group of legislators who have enough votes to pass a law, even if the leader of their government tries to stop it by using the right of veto. It means that the leader cannot prevent the law from being passed, even if he disagrees with it. Even simpler with an example. A majority that does not allow a veto is a legislative majority large enough to override the executive branch's veto as such. This means that if the executive branch, for example, the president, let's take the president, if he vetoes a bill, the legislative body can still pass the bill without the approval of the executive branch. As for the United States Congress, in order to override a presidential veto, both the House of Representatives and the Senate must pass the bill by a 2/3 majority in each chamber. Graham, let me remind you, has already gathered 80 votes, and to override the presidential veto, 67 are needed. Graham and Rubio assure that the House of Representatives will also gather a 2/3 majority of votes. Accordingly, they can go against Trump's will if they understand that Putin is clearly deceiving him and Trump is simply playing along. So, friends, maybe it's time to put pressure on the lawmakers, on Congress, on the elected officials, so that they show that they also have power, not just Donald Trump. By the way, that's exactly how it was with the javelins that Trump boasts about so much. I'll put an ellipsis here. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to leave a like.